Gather around, everybody. It's story time. I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about how I got to where I'm at. How did I become a life coach? How did I learn all this stuff that I talk about here on this channel? And I've never really told this full story. And I guess I'm not telling the full story. I'm telling like 85% of it, because there's a big piece of it that is still ongoing, and maybe I'll talk about it someday, but I'm not talking about that part yet. Anyway, I can give you most of the juicy details, and the reason I'm doing this is because people, they've wondered this. They want to know who I've read. Who was it that I read where I got all this stuff? Well, a lot of it I didn't get from a book. I've certainly read a lot of stuff, but a lot of it's come through my own personal synthesis and learning through my unique circumstances. So let's get into this. All right, I'm going to start from the beginning, because I think it sets the tone for the whole thing. So when I was like little, all right, I was obsessed with being like a superhero. I remember apparently I would like walk around with like a turkey baster. You can look up what a turkey baster looks like. It's like a little tube, and it's got this little bulb syringe at the end. And I would walk around with that. That was like my sword, and I would shove it into my sweatpants. And then I would pop the syringe off and, throw it like a grenade. And I would do a combat roll into every room. And all I wanted to do was like beat up bad guys. And like I would watch, Power Rangers, and I would get like so freaking hyped. Then I would like beat the shit out of my brothers. And that was like who I was. Like I would just be like basically in full like play like superhero mode for the first several years of my life. And then as I got older, even before puberty, it's like I also really wanted to get that other part of the hero stories. I wanted to get the princess too, So it was like, one hand, I wanted to be like storming the castle, slaying the monsters. Then I wanted to get the girl. And so this kind of like epitomized sort of who I was, like naturally. And this was tempered in a kind of unique way, in the sense that I was either at the top of the hierarchy that I was in, or I was at the very bottom. So growing up, my next door neighbors, they had 7 boys. All of them were older than me. And most of the boys other boys in the neighborhood were also older than me. And so I would spend most of my days, like, during the summer, and when I had free time, I would go and I would hang out with them. And I was since I was the youngest, I was the bottom kid on the totem pole, and I was constantly getting shit on. This is how I got good at basketball, as I spent, the first like 10 years of my life just playing people who were bigger and better than me. So that was like one half of what I would do. But then the other half is I was with my brothers. I have 3 younger brothers. And then I would have a younger cousin. And then sometimes there'd be other, of their friends and stuff like that were there. And so I was like the head of that group, because I was the oldest and the biggest, okay? And they all idolized me. So I was either at the very bottom or the very top. And so it's like I learned kind of like what it was like to be on both sides of that spectrum. And what this amounted to was I was a rather like, going into like middle school and that sort of thing, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade. I was very, very confident, outgoing kid. I was popular. I was good at sports. Sometimes I was a bit of a bully, and just because I was, I was combative, and I would put people down if they annoyed me, and sometimes I was unfair and all that kind of stuff. But in general, though, I wouldn't say that characterized me totally. And so I was so confident and popular that I was able to actually date the girls in the grade ahead of me. In 6th grade, I had 7th grade girlfriends, and in 7th grade, I had 8th grade girlfriends. And if you can think back to that time, that's a pretty big deal. And so I thought pretty highly of myself, and I managed to get this one girl I had this big crush on to date me. She was in 8th grade, and I was in 7th grade. And like I was on top of the world, man. I thought I was the coolest dude around. And then that summer came, and she was getting ready to go to high school, and I was still in 8th grade, and she dumped me. Understandably, what sort of self-respecting high schooler would want to date a boy still in, middle school? And at that point, I remember when I got broken up with, I cried for like 5 minutes, and then I just repressed it. And looking back, I realized there was an interesting split that occurred, because that really kind of beat me up. On one hand, I became obsessed with self-development, because, it was kind of like this thing where it's like, oh, well, I'm going to become so good and excellent that no one will ever reject me again. And so I remember I started like reading Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. I started reading like Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, like, the classics. And it sort of branched into some other stuff as well. So that was like one track that started from that breakup. The other track that started was that I started getting really like addicted to porn and video games and that sort of stuff, like escapism. It was like it was the beginning of this extreme split mind where one part of me had like all these like extremely high ideals and pursuits and, desire for self-mastery and that sort of thing that ultimately was kind of coming from this place of inadequacy. But then I had this other part that just wanted to be this hedonistic, pleasure-seeking escapism like monster, right? And oddly enough, these two parts kind of operated in balance. I didn't get, extremely awesome, and I also didn't get, things didn't fall apart, at least in high school. I was definitely less confident. I was less outgoing. I was less popular in high school. I kind of, things started to get a little bit better, like junior and senior year, as I started playing, being good on the basketball team and getting comfortable in my friend group and things like that. But it wasn't really the same energy that I had in middle school or grade school. And then things started to get a little bit worse. So my high school girlfriend and I, we broke up my first year of college. She was still in high school, and it was almost like the situation I went through with that first serious girlfriend reversed, where I dumped her, and that got really ugly, and that made me very unhappy with myself with how I handled that. And so like that colored a lot of like my college experience, at least particularly in the beginning. And then on top of that, I really didn't like my major. I was very lost. Like for the first time in my life, I felt like shit. Like I don't really know what I'm doing. Because all before that, it was like, do good at sports, have fun with your friends, and do good in school. But now it was like, all right, shit, I don't really like this school stuff. I don't really play sports anymore. I'm trying to figure out this what friends look like in college, because all my friend groups and stuff shifted, and I burned some relationships and things like that. And so ended up college. Well, I had some good times and things like that. A lot of it got kind of dark because I was very lost. And so I went even harder into like the porn and the video games, and I also like my interests in self-development. They went very, very wide. I started getting into like New Age stuff, Eastern religion stuff, occultism, and I learned a decent amount. I learned to I really challenged my fundamental sort of Christian and Catholic beliefs, and actually, stopped identifying as Christian or Catholic and became very much something else. Trying to do my own sort of thing, and I think a lot of people around me thought it was kind of strange and far out there. But I managed to get out of college. Okay, I graduated. I got a software engineering degree from University of Delaware, and and all through college, I dated my now wife, and we had a lot of growing up that we did together during that time period. But after college, that's when things got really kind of tricky. So I went up to move in with her parents and her, my girlfriend, my now wife. And in that time period, like I first got a software engineering job. And I was like, man, I went 4 years to get this degree. I got to try it. And so I did, and I hated it. And it was even a good place. It was a good job. It was a rough commute and stuff like that. But man, when I got in there, it was the same kind of soul-sucking energy that I felt when I used to like push carts at Walmart. I just felt like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And it just like ate me up. And I remember talking to my girlfriend's mother, my now mother-in-law, and she was just saying, Maki, you can stop, you can still stay here if you want to do something else. It's like, and she basically like they gave me the permission to be like, hey, you can still stay here even if you're not working that job. And like what I wanted to do was become a life coach. I wanted to take this passion that I had for self-development and figure out how can I monetize this. This is like the only thing I really like care about. The only thing I really got a strong zest for, other than, sexual stimulation and video games. And so I did it. I quit that software engineering job, and then I started training to become a certified life coach. And the idea was, all right, I'm gonna figure out how to make my mark on the world by pursuing this passion for self-development. and I was really excited to do it. But I ended up mostly just jerking off and playing video games when I was supposed to be working on that business. And this killed me. It was like the sort of semi-agreement that I had between that split that I mentioned to you, this high ideal, self-developer, and then this hedonistic, pleasure-seeking monster. Like, that agreement seemed to like completely get destroyed, like where there would be some kind of balance. And I pretty much just like could only get myself to escape. And looking back, it was probably because it was, on one hand, no one was looking over my shoulder. There was no teachers. There was no coaches. There was no one there looking for, expecting something of me, checking in on me, setting deadlines, setting penalties if I don't follow through. And so I was kind of like able to keep up with my coaching certification program, but I wasn't like building a business. I wasn't making any money. I wasn't even close to that. And so that was like putting me in this position where I was constantly having to lie to my girlfriend and her family and be like, oh yeah, I'm doing great. I'm, doing this, that, and the other. When in reality, I just like wasn't doing jack shit. And it seemed like the more I tried to force myself to take action, the more I tried to use my rational brain to override that emotional impulse to escape, the more I actually ended up escaping, right? And it was a tough situation. Like, looking back on it, thank God I wasn't able to like really understand what I was trying to do. I was like 23-year-old kid who was trying to convince other people to like hire me as a life coach. And I hadn't done jack shit with my life. And, it's like, I had like zero authority. Like there must have been like some level of that blind confidence left over from a kid to be able to do that. But that's what I was trying to do. And it's a tough sell. And so it's like I had that daunting task in front of me, which seems so hard. And so I just like, I wasn't able to hack it, and I just kept escaping. And so it kind of reached a breaking point when I almost got caught watching porn. I remember like, I would always sort of keep additional windows open so I could alt-tab to somewhere else if someone like came into the room. I'd have like one, earphone out so I could hear people coming. But man, I almost got caught one time. And that would have been so bad. Like if my girlfriend caught me using porn, she probably would have broken up with me. And then I would have gotten kicked out. And then I would have to move back home, live in my parents' basement, jobless. And that would have been a nightmare. That would have been, absolutely devastating. Like everything that I was working for would have gotten shot to hell. So, I was like, man, I gotta do something here. And I remember like just like feeling so helpless, feeling like, what the frick is wrong with me? I want to be this super highly developed dude, and I'm putting everything that I feel like I have into it, and I'm not getting anywhere. I'm getting the most embarrassing results possible. And like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get myself to be the person that I want to be? I remember like falling on my knees and just like praying to God, like, dude, help me out here. What's going on? And around that time, then there was like it was almost miraculously I had an answer. And later that night, I remember like typing in porn addiction for the first time into the Google search bar, and some very important things happened as a result of that. I found, first of all, the NoFap subreddit, which did a couple of things. One, it helped me realize, wow, there's hundreds of thousands of guys out there who are struggling with similar issues to me. I'm not alone. I'm not just this broken weirdo who can't get himself motivated and focused and that sort of thing. I'm not the only guy who struggles with porn addiction. And then the second piece was like understanding the science, and that porn use actually could be an addiction. Prior to that, I thought every time I quit and I just felt horrible, that was just my body telling me that, oh yeah, no, you need to be doing this. You need to be jerking off and using porn. When in reality, I was able to see like, oh shit, that was just me going through withdrawal. Oh, and I can heal all this stuff. Like if I just quit porn for an extended period of time, if I just go through a porn reboot, it's like, oh, and it's like, I don't have, I thought that like I had a productivity and focus problem because I was using porn. But I mean, really what it was, that's I guess what I'm saying here is that I realized that the brain changes that were being caused inside of me, they were screwing up like my motivation, like me constantly, bombarding my brain with dopamine and that kind of stuff through porn and video games. That was actually why I was having, in part, like such a huge amount of trouble focusing and getting myself to show up and follow my dreams that I actually had the opportunity to do. And so this led to like this internal shift where prior I was always just trying to white knuckle my way to be better. I was always trying to use my rational mind to just squash this emotional, Jekyll and Hyde like monster thing that would pop up and just cause me to sabotage everything. I was always just trying to defeat that part of me. But I realized through this, it's like, oh shit, this part's not a bad guy. This is not some evil part of me that needs to be defeated. This is a part that's sick, that's in pain, that's addicted to something. It needs to be healed. It needs to be helped. And so this created a huge transformation in the way that I worked for myself. And what I realized actually happened was that this hurting, addicted part of me actually became kind of like my first coaching client. Like at the time I was learning all, how to be a life coach, how to do coaching. And there's actually, everyone today calls themselves a coach. Anyone in any niche who sells some kind of service where they, message you or talk to you, they say, oh yeah, I'm a coach. But there's actually, a technical skill set for people who are true coaches. And that's what I was going through. I was going through a really good program. It was teaching me this stuff. And so what I did is I started to apply all those coaching methodologies specifically to this part of myself that was addicted. And so I started self-talk in this way where it was like my rational brain talking to my emotional brain. And I would use these coaching techniques instead of trying to just get that part to shut up or change or whatever. I just treated it as I would, a client, and I started working with it. I started asking it open-ended questions. I started listening to it. I started coming up with game plans that part of me felt like it could agree with, which turned out to be an absolute game changer for me. That's when I really started to see awesome progress. I remember I relapsed once in the process of trying to quit porn. And then the next streak is actually the one I'm still on now, 10 years later. And so I saw this awesome result, and I saw a lot of guys in the porn addiction recovery community not getting good results. I saw them really struggling. I saw them not knowing what the heck they should do. And so I started sharing my ideas, first on the NoFap subreddit, and then I started even making YouTube videos. And ironically, this is how I found my path into life coaching, because I was able to find a niche that was underserved, that I had some authority in. It's like, hey, at least I quit porn, right? I actually pulled it off. So and here's some of my ideas on YouTube, and they got good views and good feedback and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, I can do this. And then from there, really what happened was just a huge amount of trial and error and iteration. I worked with a lot of guys, a lot of guys one-on-one. And then I worked with a lot of guys through my programs. I've had multiple programs and courses and things like that. And, I'd find some stuff that seemed to work, and then it would stop working. Or some stuff that would, I thought would work, didn't work at all. And I would have to keep refining, distilling and stuff like that, because my whole income was dependent upon whether or not I could actually deliver guys results, right? This is, I didn't have, I didn't have the luxury of a therapist who doesn't need to get someone results. A therapist, they can just keep talking to you, and it's expected that you're just gonna be unhappy perpetually, and you're just gonna talk to your therapist about it, and that's just the way things go, and that's just an ongoing thing. But as a coach, it's well, you're more like a taxi driver. It's if your taxi driver doesn't get you to your destination, you're just what the fuck, dude? I'm not paying you. And so that's what you are as a coach. That's where the term coach actually comes from, is coach driver. Is you're getting people from point A to point B. So I really had to figure out how to deliver results. And so that's what I did, is I just spent an insane amount of time thinking about this problem that no one really had at that point, because the whole conversation around internet porn and that sort of thing hadn't really been a thing. I was one of the very first guys to really talk about this publicly, on YouTube with my face and my actual story. Almost no one had done that. Now, NoFap bloggers and stuff like that, and vloggers are pretty common, which I'm thankful for. It's really good that the conversation is now far more public, but it wasn't at that time. And so that's what it was, is I had to kind of build this set of ideas and concepts around quitting porn that wasn't really there because it was a new problem, right? Like this old 12-step model was kind of the standard, but that wasn't really developed for a drug that lives inside of everybody's pocket. You know, it wasn't really designed to work with a substance that in many ways was baked right into your body, which is your natural sexual drives. And so I just had to take it deeper because like the whole idea of once an addict, always an addict doesn't really work for porn addiction. You know, you're going to be living a very constrained and sad life if you operate from that framework when it comes to quitting porn, because then you're going to have to always be afraid of your sexuality and afraid of literally every electronic device around you. And I was just like, man, all right, that's unacceptable. And so we need something bigger, deeper, and better. And so I just wrestled with that for thousands of hours. And that's, you know, that's the hard work part of just sticking with something, sticking with a question and not really, you know, there's nothing special about it. It was just a lot of labor, a lot of thinking, and a lot of conversations with people and failure, really. And so you do enough of that kind of stuff, eventually you're going to learn a thing or two, and you're going to learn you're going to develop your own unique perspectives on things. And so that's, you know, if you find anything that I say unique and interesting, this is where it's pretty much come from. But in the end, you know, what I was able to do is I was pretty much able to like realize my dream. Like, you know, going back to that kid who just wanted to be this superhero. I feel like I get to kind of do that now. Like, I feel like quitting porn, or really like anti-escapism. That's how I kind of label myself now. An anti-escapism coach. I feel like this kind of stuff is at the very center of what's screwing up the world, is that we've got men who do not show up to life. And because of that, they allow evil to operate in the world. In many ways, because their own life is too jacked up for them to even do anything about it, right? You know, society's screwed up in many ways because the family's screwed up, and the family's screwed up because the sexual relationship between the husband and wife is screwed up, because the male sexual relationship is screwed up in and of itself, because every guy's like jerking off to porn. And yeah, women have their own issues and stuff too, but like, you know, I'm not a woman, I'm a man. And so it's like, I want to take ownership over the sphere of influence that I feel like I am best suited to serve. And so I feel like, you know, that's what it is. It's like you can, if I tell the story like this, I'm hoping that some of you guys can see some parallels in your own life and hopefully get some inspiration from this, because you don't know how the story is going to go. You know, you can go back to any of those points, and you can see a dark time, right? You can see a lot of struggle, you know, a lot of struggle where, you know, I was getting dumped, I was insecure, you know, I was, feeling lost and hopeless, you know, I was feeling like, you know, I have no idea how to help these guys. You know, the number of times I was banging my head against the wall, just trying to figure out how to make the business or the content or whatever work. And it's like, if you go through enough of these sort of periods where you just jump into the deep end, before you even know how to swim. And yeah, sometimes you drown, metaphorically, hopefully not literally. Sometimes, yeah, you take some L's, but if you just keep going, eventually you're going to learn. And you actually just stop fearing that process. You know, when I take on a new endeavor now, it's just like, yeah, it's going to suck for a little bit. That's just the way it works, right? It's just, you know, I used to draw a lot. And you'd always do a rough draft, and it's always shit first, you know. And now when I create content, it's the same thing. It's like I do something poorly, and then you make it better. You know, this idea of iteration and growth and improvement, it's got to be married to this idea of perpetual failure and death. You can't have the growth mindset without having the willingness to fail and the willingness to feel pain. And a lot of guys struggle with that, but the thing is, like, you don't need to like force yourself through it. It's already there. The pain you need to transform is already present inside of you. You just need to become present to it. And what I mean by that is that you just need to learn how to start being a true friend to yourself. Like, what would it look like if you were an actual friend to yourself? Like, you were actually bros with yourself. Like, you think about, like, you know, your top best friends, you like that feeling of warmth and fun you have with them. It's like, you can actually have that with yourself. You know, you can be your number one advocate and friend. And it sounds kind of weird and lame or whatever you point it, if you think about it in a judgmental way. But why wouldn't you want that? You know, and like, how much better would your life become? How much more capable would you be in terms of like doing hard things? You know, it's like, if you've ever done hard things with a close buddy versus by yourself or someone you didn't like, that's the worst. When you have to do hard things with someone you don't like. Oh God, that's the worst. Like, you have a shit teacher who's really hard. Oh, the worst. Or you have like a coworker who's just like, you can't stand being around, and you got to do this task together that is also terrible. So it's like, if you can learn how to become someone that's enjoyable to be around in your own head, well, then it's so much easier to do all this hard work, because you can actually relax and even find enjoyment in it. You can laugh about it. You can, you know, at least be consoled in the process. And so I'd say that's kind of like the biggest thing that, you know, my journey has taught me, is like how to be a friend to myself. And that's where everything comes from. It comes from this idea of dignity, this idea that no matter where you're at, no matter how much you screwed up, no matter how good you are, you're still just fundamentally good. You know, you can't go up, you can't go down. You're good and you're worthy of your own love. And if you can internalize that and you can act upon that, then your journey will continue to progress. Your journey will continue to spiral upward, even if it seems like there's some dips and blocks and valleys along the way. So yeah, I know today's a little bit of a longer video, and I don't know how many of you actually really even cared to hear anything like this, but it was what was on my mind, and I just wanted to share it with you guys. So that's what I have for you. If you want to see more specifically the stuff I developed, like these concepts that I developed, and you want to check out that manhood mastery training in the description below. You'll get some of the story again, but I'll also be sharing with you some more practical ways to actually implement this sort of stuff, like the actual structures and techniques and things that I discovered along the way. So that's what I have, my friends. Ooh yeah. See you on the next one.